Okay, hi everyone. My name is Sarah. I'm a PhD student at UCL, and today I'll be talking about Fanto, which is a protocol that I designed as part of my PhD at UCL. This is joint work with my supervisor, Sarah McEljon, and with Paddy, which you may remember from yesterday's talk. So before I start, just to give you a bit of context and background, let me quickly recall what are the differences between Bitcoin and traditional consensus, so consensus as we used to do it before Bitcoin. So in Bitcoin, participation is open. It means that participants can just join and leave the protocol whenever they wish. So this is in comparison to traditional consensus protocol where there's a fixed set of participants. They need to know who they are. We don't have that with Bitcoin. It's completely open. Also, we have one message that is broadcast per round, so it means that in Bitcoin, in order to reach consensus, they're just the miners who solve the proof of work, who's going to broadcast their block, and then hopefully, if there is no fork, it's going to be accepted. Again, in contrast with traditional consensus protocol, where people have prepare, etc., commit, many message exchange. So in Bitcoin, incentives are at the core of the security. And really, this is the reason why we can have, this one message broadcast. It's because there's the whole proof of work, and, it costs money to create block, etc. So really, incentives is the key here. So, however, all of this has a cost, and we all know it, that proof of work consumes a lot of energy. There are, many approximations, maybe 1 million jets flying, or Iceland, or, whatever country. We don't really know, but we just know that it's a lot of energy. We are all, fully aware of it. And also another problem is that it's slow because, we have the proof of work, by design, the proof of work should take 10 minutes. That's, for the security. So it means we have top one block every 10 minutes, and, same approximation say that it's approximately 7 transactions per second in Bitcoin, so not ideal. So could we have a blockchain without proof of work? So as you know from the title of this whole session, there is a very famous alternative to proof of work that is called proof of stake. So we've seen talk about it. So I know you now all know what proof of stake is about. It's instead of having computation that determine the new leader, it's going to be stake in a proof of stake. Leader. I'm not going to explain that further. You all know what it is. So now my question is can we get the same guarantees using proof of stake as we have with proof of work? And actually, there are many problems associated with it. So nothing at stake, for example, the previous speaker mentioned it. I'm going to quickly mention what it is. So the idea is when you have proof of stake, it doesn't cost money to create a block. So it means that if we have a fork, participants can just, extend all the chains because it doesn't cost them anything, so they may as well, try their best, and they have nothing to lose. So that's the nothing at stake problem. So there is also the grinding problem. So again, this was mentioned by, the person who asked the question at the end. So the grinding problem is that this idea of similarly, it doesn't cost anything to create a block. So let's say that I'm elected leader and I get the right to create a block. I could just grind through all the parameters possible in order, to find a block, a specific block, that's going to give me some unfair advantage in the future. That's grinding. And lastly, there are long-range attacks. So again, still the same idea. Let's imagine, that we have a chain of blocks, and then an attacker is going to bribe all participants, for example, by their previous secret key. Now they are not in the consensus anymore, and because it doesn't cost anything to create block, they're just going to create block with this secret key and just rewrite the entire history of the blockchain. And because the participants are not even in the system anymore, an adversary could do this attack at no cost because participants have no incentive. They may, sell their old keys for barely nothing. So that's the main 3 problems with proof of stake. So there are, fortunately, some solutions that have been proposed. Again, in the previous talk, they were mentioned. So there is Algorand, which is also, doing some kind of like PBFT-style protocol where there is like a committee that is voting on the block. Again, the previous speaker mentioned it. There's also, Ouroboros and Snow White that are more, like cryptographic based. So the problem with having like PBFT style is like also there is a big overhead. There are again, like voting and prepare and commit and things. So lot of messages. So one of our ideas when designing this new protocol that I'll present later is to use incentive to move away from this PBFT style and have something, that is more I don't want to like repeat what the previous speaker was saying, but like mimic a proof of work as well. So the idea is like we're really gonna leverage this economic component that we have in Bitcoin in order to have a protocol such that there's just one block that is broadcast, and we don't need to have like all of this voting. That is a pretty big overhead. Okay, so indeed, as I said, like in my previous slide, and as I have like repeated right now, in blockchains, incentive matters, and incentives. Just to like prove it to you, a quick example, we know like there are many like attacks and failures in incentive in Bitcoin. For example, there's selfish mining. Again, selfish mining. There's like the verifier dilemma. There's the miner's dilemma. There is like plenty of bribery attacks. So really. It's like very, like there are a lot of failures in incentives, so it's very important to try and get it right if we want to have a secure protocol. So how do we do that? How can we get the incentive right? So what we did is like we created a new model, kind of. So this, what do we want from this model? So we want a model that incorporates rational players. Because when we do security and cryptography, we don't really consider like incentives and like rationality that we do when we do game theory. So the idea is like we want to still do like security, but incorporate this kind of like game theory stuff and have rational players. However, we're still doing like security. And in security, it's not always obvious what the incentives of the attacker can be. And, they can be like not money or anything. So it's still very important, in addition to rational player, to consider like fully malicious player. And lastly, something that we want from our model is to consider coalitions. So this, again, we know that coalitions are a big problem in Bitcoin. We see with like mining pools. This is like a threat to decentralization. This makes the protocol less secure. So it's very important in our model to like take this into account, that coalitions do form. So that's what we want. Now, fortunately for us, there is some work that has been done in this direction. So first, there is the bar model. So this was introduced by Jean-Philippe Martin, and his co-author. So bar stands for Byzantine, altruistic, and rational. So again, this means that we're gonna, consider in our model both Byzantine and rational players. So this I have already mentioned what they are, and then we also gonna consider like altruistic players, which are players that just follow the rule, or like good players. And also, it is actually quite a realistic assumption to consider like altruistic player, because we actually like see them in real life, in real system. Like even in Bitcoin, like we know that mining, is not like the rational things to do, but a lot of people still follow the protocol. Okay, so that's for the bar model that we're gonna use. Next, we're gonna use something that is called robustness. And this was introduced by Itai Abraham and his co-author. So robustness encompasses two properties. The first one is resilience. So remember I was telling you about like coalitions. So resilience is really gonna take like these coalitions into account, and the idea is like a system would be resilient if, like, even if people form coalitions, they are still incentivized to follow the protocol. So if you are familiar with the Nash equilibrium, which probably you are, you can see that as kind of like a coalition resistance Nash equilibrium. And next, the second property of robustness is immunity. So again, I've talked about the fact that we have both a rational and like non-rational player in our system. And immunity is going to capture the fact that even if we have like, completely like malicious adversary that are actually willing to lose money, then these adversaries are not going to affect the other players. So even if someone is like, I want to crash this system, I'm going to sabotage this, even if I have to spend like, millions of dollars doing that, well, really, like, they cannot really, like, impact the like, utility of the other player. So they don't affect the system. That's the idea behind robustness. Okay, so that's like the part of our model that really like consider incentives. So as I said, it's important. But that's not it. So in addition to this, we also want to have, more traditional security property that are associated with blockchains. And again, fortunately, these have been studied by the academic literature. So there are some properties that we'd like to achieve. One of them is chain growth. So I think the name is pretty explicit. It just means that the chain grows. So this is like the idea of liveness for those of you who are familiar with distributed systems. So it means that, blocks are created, basically. Then we want to have chain quality. So chain quality, it means that an adversary cannot contribute more block to the blockchain than what they are supposed to. So for example, if you think about proof of work, you should create blocks proportionally to your computational power, and that's basically what chain quality is like, if you have 10% of the computational power, you should contribute 10% of the block, more or less. Okay, and then we have like a common prefix. So again, I think this is quite explicit by the name. Common prefix states that we want all the like miners in the system to agree on their view of the blockchain, except maybe for the last block. So these are the properties that are usually associated with blockchains. Okay, so now that I have introduced the model and the security that we want to achieve, I'm going to present the protocol Fanto, which is a proof-of-stake protocol. So there are two parts in this protocol. First, we want to have a leader election. So again, remember, when we have proof of work, you can kind of see that as a leader election, where the person who solved like the proof of work is elected leader. So instead of having that, because we don't want proof of work, we have a cryptographic leader election. So we just want someone or many people to be elected in order to gain the right to create block. So this leader election, we want it to be publicly verifiable. So again, that makes sense because we don't want anyone to be able to claim, I get the right, otherwise that would be kind of messy. So this needs to be like a publicly verifiable proof of eligibility. And lastly, so we want one block to elect at least one leader. Again, I think that's obvious because otherwise nothing will happen. Okay, so that's for our leader election. So that's one part of the Fanto protocol. And so associated with that, we have what we call a betting scheme. So again, this betting scheme, the idea would be to use incentive to move away from like, the PBFT style proof-of-stake protocol. So again, like the idea here is like when, players are gonna be able to like create block, then we want to have rules of like how they add it to the blockchain and, what is the fork choice rule. And that's what we call betting, because if you think about proof of work, you can kind of see that as a betting system, because imagine there are, two chains. Then if you create a block on top of one chain, like you are spending money, like betting that this chain is gonna work. So really the idea that what we call betting is just like creating a block. Okay, so I'm gonna start by presenting our leader election. So first, what properties do we want for the leader election? We want it to be fair. So that's the same notion, chain quality that I have, expressed earlier. So we want, for example, that everyone is elected with the same probability, or, because we are in proof of stake, maybe the probability should be like proportional to their to the stake of the person. But basically, we don't want an adversary to be able to be elected more than what they should. We also want this leader election to be unpredictable. Because think about it. If an adversary can know in advance which participant is going to be elected leader, then they can, DDoS them, and we just, never heard about them. So we want unpredictability. And in addition to this, our protocol is also going to give us, private unpredictability, which means that even a player cannot determine even for themselves if they are going to be elected leader in the next round. So there's, unless before some step, but you cannot predict too much in advance, even for yourself, if you're going to be elected leader. And lastly, we want liveness. So again, the idea is even if there's an adversary in the network, the other participants should still be able to elect a leader nonetheless. Okay, so in order to achieve all of this, what we're going to do is we're going to use a random beacon. So I'm sure that here everyone is familiar with the concept of a random beacon. This is a pseudo-randomly generated number. And the idea is this random beacon is going to be associated with a block. So with each block, there's a random beacon associated. Okay? Okay. So our leader election is very much inspired by the one used in Algorand. So this is roughly what it consists in. So again, I think, I think that people in this audience are quite familiar with Algorand, so I'm going to explain it, but very quickly. So first, we're going to initialize a random beacon. So this can be done, using any coin tossing scheme. There are a lot of this in cryptography. So again, if you are familiar with this, if you are not, it's fine, don't worry. But if you are, you may know that this protocols, they also require a lot of exchange of messages, which we don't really like. But the idea is we're going to do this coin tossing scheme only once in order to initialize the random beacon in a fair way. And then after that, after we have initialized the random beacon, we're going to use a verifiable random function. Again, we talked about it, the previous speaker talked about it, so I'm sure you all know what it is. And you're going to apply the verifiable random function to the random beacon, which is going to give you a new random number. And then you're going to check if this number is less than target. And if it is, you will be elected leader. So again, similar to other proof-of-stake protocol, hopefully you are familiar with this. So now, in addition to this, we're going to use a verifiable delay function in order to achieve liveness. So verifiable delay function, this is a crypto primitive that was actually invented by the people who are organizing this conference. So this was Benedict, Dan Bonnet, and Joe. And the idea is so this is a function that you're going to apply to a seed, so for example, the random number, and it's going to take some time to compute. So the way, to abstractly see this thing is if no one is is elected leader, what participants are going to do is that they are going to redraw the lottery, but only after some time. So really, this verifiable delay function is what's going to force the participant to wait some amount of time before they can redraw the lottery and then see if with this, new lottery they are elected leader. And the idea is you're going to do that up until someone is elected leader. And this, so this will happen hopefully quite fast. Okay, so this was for the leader election protocol. So again, to sum up, even if you didn't really understand what it was about, the idea is one block is going to elect at least one leader. And that's the main thing to remember. So now the main, core of the protocol. So first, in our protocol, we're going to use block DAG, and our protocol is inspired by the Fanto protocol by Jonathan and Aviv. So the idea I'm going to explain what a block DAG is if you don't know. So first, we're going to have a block that bets on its parent block. So again, I have explained this with, the proof of work. So this is like similar. Just, a block, create a block on top of another, and it's similar as betting on this block, right? But now, because we are in a block DAG setting, we're going to have that a block also references other block. So let me illustrate that. Here you see that block C is betting on block A. So again, similar to proof of work, you are creating a block on top of another block. However, in this case, like block C is also like referencing block B, and you can see that as a way to say, okay, I'm extended, chain A, but I'm also aware that there is this other chain. So this is a block DAG, but still there's this notion of chain. So these two links, they are not the same. So AC is a chain, not BC. Okay. So now the idea behind our protocol is that the more connections you have, the better the score of your block is going to be. Also, let me quickly make it something clear here, is that when I say connection, I don't mean connection in terms of like network. I mean connection in terms of the DAG structure. So for example, in this case, you see that C is connecting to both A and B, and that's what I mean by connection. So in terms of the DAG. Okay, so now the idea is that we're going to break tie using the random beacon. So remember, I told you, with every block, there's a random beacon associated. And the idea is like a block can only reference blocks that have a smaller score. So to make that a bit clearer, so here we have block A and B. Each of them has a number, so random beacon associated with them, RA and RB. And we assume that, RA is smaller than RB. And this is, what's going to break the tie between block A and B. And so we're going to say that block A is like winning. So in that case, block C is extending block A and referencing block B. But for example, if someone wants to extend block B, they are not allowed to do that. And this is because of this rule, the last bullet point, that a block can only reference block with smaller score. And the idea behind that is like the main chain is going to grow faster than the weak chain. So because this is like the main idea behind the protocol, I'm going to illustrate that one more time. Okay, so here you can see that we have two chains, AC and BD. And you can see that, block C has better connection than block D because, there are more edges in its subgraph. So we can say that, the chain AC is the winning one. Okay, makes sense. Now imagine that we have an adversary that wants to cheat and wants to extend the weak chain. So that will be chain BD. So they're going to create their block here. Now, by the rule of the protocol, the only way they are able to do that is by referencing only block A. Because if they were referencing block C, it would be as if they were telling everyone, look, guys, I'm aware that, this block exists, but I don't care. I want to cheat. I want to, choose the weakest chain. And so that's obvious misbehavior, right? So that's why we don't allow that. A block that reference C would not be accepted, right? On the other hand, if a block wants to bet, on the strong chain, then they are allowed to reference the weak chain. So as you see on this graph, we see that clearly the strong chain is going to grow faster than the weak chain because it's going to have more edges in its sub-DAG. Okay, hopefully this is clear. Now what we're going to have in our protocol is that we're going to reward connectivity. So again, a block, and same, connectivity in terms of the DAG. So it means that a block, that have more edges is going to earn more rewards. And also a block that is not, connected well enough is going to get, some punishment. So how do we achieve security? So again, Like the idea is like players are gonna be incentivized to reference other blocks because of what I've just said, because they're gonna earn more reward, and also by doing so, it's gonna make them more likely to be in the main chain, because if they have more connection to other block, it's gonna also increase their score. And also, players are incentivized to publish their block because they want to get like more reference again by other blocks. So this is really how we're gonna achieve like robustness. Remember this idea of like incentive compatibility that I talked about in the beginning of my talk. Okay, so that's for the incentives. Now, what about the chain, the more like blockchain security property? So remember, I'll talk about chain growth and common prefix. So in my case, because I have a block DAG, I merged these two properties into one that I called convergence, but that captured the same idea. And so if convergence is achieved, is because of this notion that the main chain grows faster that I've just explained before. So like the idea is like players are gonna reach consensus. Like we're not gonna have many chains that are gonna grow. And next, chain quality. Again, remember this idea of fairness. So this is achieved thanks to the fair leader election that I've mentioned previously. Okay, so in addition to that, remember at the beginning of my talk, I talked about long-range attacks, right? So in order to thwart them, what we do is that we add a decentralized checkpointing. So I'm gonna explain that quite quickly because it's almost the end. But very briefly, the idea is like we're gonna have like candidate blocks. So for example, here x1 and x2, which are candidates to be like finalized. And then you can kind of see that as a two-phase commit. And the idea is like after 2/3 of the candidate, and also let me just specify that for the sake of these slides, we're gonna assume that the participants are fixed. Just to make it like simpler. So once 2/3 of the participants I've placed a bet on x1 and x2, we're gonna say that they are justified. And then we're gonna redo this, this again. And after, again, 2/3 of the participants have placed bet on the block y1 and y2, then x1 and x2 are finalized. And basically what we show in our paper is like by the time that x1 and r2 are finalized, then all the participants are aware of this. And so like an adversary could not come up with another like x3, no one will accept that. So that's the decentralized checkpointing, very quickly. So in addition to that, in our paper, we did some simulation. So the idea is that we're gonna simulate the strategy that an adversary would have, either in the rational case or in the fully malicious case. So the idea is like the adversary is gonna try to grind in order to either like maximize its profits if they are in a coalition, or also they're gonna try and harm the honest player. So that's the simulation we made, and basically what we found is that a coalition can actually like increase their profits, but only in a limited way. And similarly, if there is some irrational adversary that want to like attack the other player, they can also do so in a very limited way, and also they're gonna harm themselves more than others. So they're actually gonna spend money in this attack. So we also, captured the idea of like convergence, and we saw that indeed it's normal in our case that we have some forks, but then it's acceptable because blocks are created really fast, and chain quality is also indeed achieved. So before I finish my talk, I'm gonna very quickly explain what are the differences of Fanto between like the other proof-of-stake protocol. So Fanto, just like Snow White and Ouroboros Prowess, there's only one message per round that is broadcast. So again, it's like just one block, and we don't have like this idea of like voting like we have in Algorand. Also, in Fanto, unlike all these proof-of-stake protocol, we don't really rely on synchronized clocks, in order to achieve liveness. And this is because we use this verifiable delay function. And also, I think we are the only one who are really like concerned a lot with instances and who consider more a complex version of incentive security property by this idea of liveness that I introduced at the beginning of my talk. Okay, so to conclude, we use like block DAG in order to enforce accountability, to really see, what the players were doing and to force them to show their view of the blockchain. We also incentivize players to follow the protocol, and really we leverage incentive in order to have a blockchain type proof-of-stake protocol rather than something where there are a lot of voting, etc. You can find the paper online, and I think we have maybe some time for questions. Thank you.
All right, we have time for 1 or 2 quick questions.
Hi, thank you for the great talk. I had a question about the random beacon, the construction of the random beacon. Mm-hmm. Is the VRF applied before the VDF, or?
No, yes, exactly. The VRF is applied before the VDF.
And so is it a stake-based?
What?
Is it based on a stake? I want to understand better how you prevent the grinding. If the VRF is before VDF and it's not based on a stake, they can grind many VRFs so that they can elect a desirable leader. So,
okay, yeah, that's a good point. So the idea is so in order to participate in the protocol, people have to deposit some stake because you remember I was telling you that there's a punishment associated. So because we have this deposit, that we kind of have a list, of all the participants. And when they deposit stake, participants have to commit to their secret key. So it means that basically when they compute the VRF, they have nothing to grind to because their secret key is already committed. So they and then they apply it to the random beacon, who say he is is unbiaseable. So they cannot grind through secret keys, for example. So the VDF is only in the case where no one is elected leader. So the thing is in the base case, we don't use the VDF. So if no one is elected leader, then everyone is going to update their random beacon with the VDF, but that will be after some time. And in the meantime, if, in the meantime, where everyone computes the VDF, someone comes with a proof of eligibility, then we will just stop and people will not finish the computation, right?
So I guess it's kind of a piggybacking on that question. Mm-hmm. What is your network assumption to make sure that you are saying that after some time, then everybody runs VDF? Mm-hmm. That clearly shows that you have notion of synchrony, and for counting references, you have to have some notion of how long, a upper bound on latency in the block broadcast. So what is your network assumptions?
So we assume partial synchronicity.
Can you be more specific?
So basically it's also the assumption that is very used very often in the blockchain type of setting. So the idea is participants are gonna receive message within a bounded delay, but participants are not aware of this delay. So that's why we cannot really have timeouts because people don't know the delay, but we know that after some fixed delay they're gonna receive the block.
All right, now we'll have